Hello everyone, RadLad here, and welcome back to yet another video. And yes, you may be wondering, where have I been and why haven't I really done any substantial uploads since that Roblox video back in June? Well, there's a lot of things that have come up in my life that have kind of made video editing a little bit trickier, hence why most of the uploads I've had are just typical gameplay videos, and not really what made my channel noteworthy in the first place. So, that begs the question, what to do now? Well, I'm glad you asked, because I'm bringing back the channel to be better than ever. You got that right. And today's video will mark a new era for RadLad Studios. An era full of justice, honor, quality, and amazingness! So, stay tuned. Today's mission is to get back into the video editing game. And I'm not just going to do my usual stick and where I talk into a mic for 30 minutes while some gameplay footage plays in the background because, yeah, that's pretty boring. So that's why I'm going to spice things up and add a little bit more flair to these videos. Starting with the fact that I now have a physical presence. Hello. Now, will that alone instantly make my videos a masterclass in art? Probably not, but hey, it's at least something new, and I'm hoping that it will actually make these videos have a little bit more pizzazz. But with all that out of the way, we have one more issue. What the hell am I going to talk about today? Because I kind of did all that intro stuff without thinking about, the actual content of the video. Welcome to the Idea Bunker, where I record most of my videos. Now, honestly, this is probably the worst place to record stuff, considering how much open space there is. There's a lot of background noise, so that's why you always hear the furnace in the back of all my videos. But that's fine, because today's mission is to figure out something to make a video on. Probably should have had that from the get-go, but you know what? That's fine. I have plenty of ideas we can go with.
Alright, we could do like another door video. Maybe even do Metroid Doors Part 3. I have no way to record Fed Force or Dread. Perhaps I can make a video on why Half-Life is the worst game ever made, but I'd prefer that not have my head end up on a stick. So let's just do a review or something on a game nobody cares about.
There's no games to talk about. This requires divine help. Pepsiman, I need you! Pepsiman! Rats? What the hell is this game? Well, only one way to find out, I suppose. What the fuck just happened?
Alright, maybe I should actually do some research on the game first. Okay, turns out the game was developed by the studio Tarantula and released for the Game Boy Color in Europe, originally under the title Reservoir Rat, though it was changed to Rats when it came to the States. Funnily enough, Tarantula would go on to become Rockstar Lincoln, as in the Rockstar company that makes the GTA and Red Dead Redemption games. Damn, where's this guy in GTA 5? Though, despite the funny connection, Tarantula hasn't really made that many things of note during its time before being a subsidiary of Rockstar. They really just made a bunch of pinball games and the Game Boy Color GTA ports, because yes, those do exist for some reason. Back to the game itself, the story, much like older platformers of its type, isn't told within the game itself and is instead contained in the instruction manual. Mr. Raz used to be an awful hitman. Luckily he found his girlfriend Roletta Mozzarella and stopped the killing, turning a new leaf in his life. He and Loretta moved out to the countryside and started a farm instead. However, when Mob Don Marlon Mozzarella found out that his daughter went missing, he became enraged and ordered his goons to go pick her up. So, if Mr. Raz wants to see his girlfriend ever again, he has no choice but to pick up his weapon and head into the city.
Damn, we played as a rat hitman. Now I'm really wondering why he wasn't in GTA.
Despite all of that, the game is incredibly simple. As Mr. Raz, you can jump and fire his gun, however, you can only shoot the gun the direction of where you're facing, very much how like classic Mega Man games played. Though unlike those games, these two actions are literally the only two things you can do, and you never get any more abilities for the entire duration of the game. Now this isn't necessarily a bad thing, you can get a lot out of simple mechanics, with a good example being Super Mario Bros., but the issue here is the actions rats aren't really that fun to perform. The gun is fine enough, but it can be very annoying to line up with enemies sometimes, and its range is severely hampered by the game's screen crunch. Jumping is the bigger problem here though. The mid-air movement is fine enough, and I never really had any trouble landing somewhere if it was below me. No, the thing that makes the jump obnoxious is the absolutely laughable amount of upward distance you get from it. Most platforms are placed in such a way where it looks like you can climb up with them, no problem, only for you to realize you can just barely not make it. Instead, the game will make you awkwardly jump back and forth on these horizontal platforms that are just below the vertical ones so you can climb up an inch. This is especially annoying with jumps across chasms because it can be very challenging to tell if you can even make it or not, as it has the arcade Mario Bros. Problem where just because it looks like you landed on the platform, it doesn't mean you actually did. And boy, let me tell you that getting tricked by one of these jumps just so you end up falling into a pit or an enemy isn't very enjoyable. Controls aren't the only issues this game has though, because the level design isn't doing the game favors either. The game takes place across dozens upon dozens of small self-contained stages where the only goal is to find all of the food so that the door to the next level will open up. In your way of this simple goal are a variety of enemies and other hazards that will serve to annoy you and waste your time. Due to the very simplistic nature of the controls, the levels really aren't able to throw that many interesting gimmicks at you, and they get boring quick. We have pass-through platforms, solid platforms, these dumb ladders where you can only enter in from the bottom, oil slick on platforms that makes it mildly more annoying to control yourself, and a handful of bottomless pits. And yeah, that's literally all of the things that one can expect to see in the 85 levels this game has to offer. Basically what you see in the first handful of levels is what you'll see for the entirety of the game, with the only difference being that after about 15 levels, you'll switch to a new color palette that just reskins everything without actually introducing any new functionality. I will say that for the Game Boy Color, the graphics are detailed and nice to look at, even if it gets incredibly boring to look at them by the time you get far into a specific world.
But don't worry if that didn't blow your mind, because this game's cast of 7 enemies will surely leave your mind in pieces.
This cast of enemies are somehow even more simple than the ones you'd find in Super Mario Bros. Snails are basically just red Koopas and will go back and forth in their little area until you kill them. But snakes step it up. They'll turn to fight you when you're on the same elevation as them. Not impressed yet? Don't worry. This rat enemy will have you shaking in your boots, because it can jump across multiple platforms of relatively similar height, and not only that, but it takes slightly more shots to kill it as well. Absolutely amazing. However, there's an enemy that's even more deadly than that of the rat. Allow me to introduce you to the, squirrel? Fox enemy thing? I don't know. It's basically the same as the rat, but it just takes more shot to kill and explodes upon death rather than turning into an egg like the previously mentioned foes. Oh yeah, forgot to mention, upon killing most enemies, they'll drop an egg that'll quickly respawn into a new enemy of a higher tier, unless you're able to run into it quick enough. This is somewhat interesting I guess, but it really just leads to more frustration since you have to waste your time in killing yet another simple enemy if you don't get to the egg quick enough. There are also 2 unkillable enemies that are just this random falling hammer and this bird, and they only move vertically and horizontally respectively. How thrilling. Also, each time the world changes, so do the enemy sprites, but the behavior doesn't change whatsoever and it's literally just a palette swap, so they fit in better with the new environment. These enemies also highlight a couple of other annoyances with the game as well, starting with the fact you die in one hit. Thankfully, you do keep all of your progress in the level as long as you still have some lives left over, though there's no save system in the game. Instead, it opts for a password screen to restore your progress, which thankfully fills in the last one if you happen to get a game over, but don't reset the console. They also made it so that the password retains the amount of lives you last had, meaning if you only had one going into level, you have to beat the entire thing without getting hit once. How fun! The other issue with the enemy design is how much damn waiting is involved. There will be so many times where you just have to sit and wait for them to move the hell out of the way so you can actually play the damn game. It gets so tedious because the patterns never line up with the enemies. And even when they do, you might just mess up the dumb jump, and then you fall back down, so you'll have to do it all over again. I mean, look at this fucking shit. Why are there so many bats? Ugh. Oh, and if that wasn't annoying enough, you still have to be fast in collecting all the food because there's a timer as well. And when it goes to 0, these random devils will start flying around you that will infinitely respawn to chase after you until you exit the stage. Admittedly, the whole time limit thing was never that much of an issue for me since it's very generous, especially because there's a clock power-up on a lot of the levels that will restore the time limit. Actually, that's another thing to mention about the levels, the power-ups. Unfortunately, they're not much to write home about. The egg one turns all the enemies into eggs, which sounds good, but 90% of the time, you're nowhere near the enemy, meaning they'll just respawn anyways. The heart box just gives you an extra life, and the stop sign box freezes all enemies in place, which is mildly useful, I guess. These power-ups had the potential to spice up the game, but they ultimately fail. The biggest problem this game faces is the fact it doesn't bring anything new or interesting to the table. Sure, it functions well enough, and I never ran into any game-breaking glitches, although one time this enemy just kind of killed itself, which was funny. The game also has its charm, I guess. Mr. Raz has a couple of fun idle animations like playing with his yo-yo, and the little animation before a level is cute, even if you have to sit through it every single time. But these few things don't really help the game all that much, and if you want a much better puzzle platformer, I'd highly recommend the masterpiece that is Donkey Kong 94.
Now you may think I'm forgetting to mention some of the gimmicks the game throws at you later on, but that's just not the case. This game really is that simple. What you see is what you get. And while simplicity isn't a bad thing on its own, Rats does it in the worst way possible because it doesn't do anything to spice up the gameplay at any point. Compare this to Super Mario Land 2, another simple Game Boy game.
I mean, with that game, every level is throwing something new at you. 1 minute you're platforming in the heights of a giant tree, and then another you're facing off against a literal vampire, and moments after that you're platforming through a land made up of balls and a level taking place in Mario's crotch.
Okay, maybe they went a little bit too far off their ideas, but the point still stands. Rats just does not do enough with what it has. The first 3 levels feel the exact same as the last 3 levels in design philosophy, and really the only thing separating any of the levels from each other is just the color palette. But you know what? I still haven't mentioned the boss fights of the game, so maybe that's where this game will really shine.
All 5 of the boss fights function the exact same. They just run around the arena on a set path while you still have to collect food. But unlike the other levels, you also have to kill a boss itself in order to move on. Killing him is as easy as just staying behind wherever it's going and just spamming the shoot button, or in the slime boss's case, literally just standing still and spamming the shoot button. To be honest, as sad as it is, these levels are still probably the most interesting the game ever gets. Also, the game literally ends like this.
Well, that was tedious. Rats is just... it's just not fun. It is so incredibly repetitive that it makes it just not fun to play. And while a game being repetitive isn't necessarily a bad thing, since that's very clearly what arcade games strive for, compare Rats to something like Pac-Man. Even though Pac-Man is just the same thing over and over again, the game's difficulty and challenge, along with its concept, keep it engaging for, honestly, as long until you die. Whereas Rats you'll get bored of in like 15 minutes and want to put it down. The only thing I can say that's positive about it is that it's nowhere near as bad as Metroid Prime Hunters, but even then, is that really saying anything? God, I feel like crap talking bad about a game that Pepsiman gave me, but it's just not good. I can't believe Pepsiman would do me like that. I mean, seriously. Wait a minute. This Pepsi doesn't look right. It's been Coke all along? No! Pepsiman! You're a fake! You made me play that game for 3 hours! I'm gonna beat the hell out of you! I won't stand for this! Take this! I'll never let you win. Everybody, Pepsi. Drink Pepsi. Pepsi! Only my choice! Pepsi for funerals.